As I look at myself, parts of my reflection start to change. Darker lines start to appear on my face in my reflection. It's not my reflection. My eyes focus on the glass, on the fog. It's the fog on the glass. The lines are cutting through the fog and forming letters. It's as if 20 fingers are all touching the glass at the same time, all wiping letters out of the foggy window. I step back and gasp as I realize what's happening. I stumble and fall backwards. The lantern breaks and the light goes out. The ground starts to shake. My mind is a blur. My ears start to ring. The light shines on the window and I can clearly see and read the words, "We're still here."
This is the Exploring the National Parks podcast with Dirt in My Shoes. My name is Ash, and I'm a former park ranger and the founder of Dirt in My Shoes. I think that the parks are best seen from the trail, and I'm here to make national park trip planning easy.
And I'm John. I carry the kids on the trails, I tell stories, and notice all the things that Ash doesn't care about much, like trees.
Join us as we show you around America's spectacular national parks.
We're sharing our favorite places, fun facts, adventures, and misadventures.
And we'll even throw in a little trip planning.
Let's start exploring.
Can something be considered a tradition if you've only done it once, but you're doing it again?
Yes.
Okay. We have a tradition here where every year, we're on year 2, before Halloween, we do a Haunted National Parks episode.
Yes.
And it's like one of my favorite things.
I love Halloween. I love Halloween so much.
John is a Halloween person. I am not, but I do really like these haunted stories that you write based off of haunted things that have happened in the national park.
Actual true events.
And I have to say, so we were reading through reviews on our podcast the other day, which honestly, you guys, like our podcast is the top national parks podcast on Apple. Woo! It's so cool. But I was reading through reviews and there was one that said, "Keep John weird." And I have to tell you, we got a really good laugh out of that. But I think that this episode especially is going to highlight just how awesome John is.
How weird I really am.
Your imagination is amazing. So these stories are not real stories. They're based on things that have happened.
These are based on true events, sort of. But the people and the places, the names have been changed to protect, whatever disclaimer they have at the beginning of Law and Order or whatever, But that's what you need to apply to this.
I just think it's great. Your imagination is so awesome. And basically, he just takes like a little blurb, maybe a sentence or two of something haunted that happened in the national park, and then you turn it into a story. So that's what this episode is today. John's going to do some storytelling. We're going to keep John weird. And we're going to embrace our Halloween tradition of sharing ghost stories from the national parks.
Yes. So thank you for joining us tonight around our campfires. That's what I want everybody to imagine. Imagine we're at a campfire telling ghost stories. And that's kind of what we're doing. In the first episode last year, I think we somewhat tried to make the case that many of the haunting stories coming out of the national parks shouldn't just be dismissed as fiction. And my reasoning had to do with the source of the stories, basically. If you hear about something from somebody who heard it from somebody that something supernatural or paranormal happened somewhere, is really easy to just immediately label as false in your brain. But my point in last year's episode was that what if that person telling you the story is the person that it happened to? And the person is well respected and admired in the community? Or what if there are multiple witnesses who don't know each other but witnessed the same thing? Or what if you actually know the person really well and you trust them? So what do you do? And that's last year's episode. So if you want to go back and kind of get a little bit of that was
a good one.
That was fun. But all I'm saying is that it might not be as simple as you think it is to dismiss something as fiction or false. So anyways, that was last year. This year, I'm not going to try to convince you. This Halloween, I actually wanted to cover things that most people already somewhat believe in.
Okay.
Spirits.
Oh, man. I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight, am I?
Now, I know not everybody is religious, but it seems to me that a lot of people who don't consider themselves religious feel somewhat spiritual about things. And that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It's deeply personal in what your beliefs are. But let's say you are religious. Most religious people believe in spirits. Maybe you're more spiritual and you feel like you connect to things on a level that's hard to explain. Or maybe you're agnostic. You can't prove things either way, but you're open to the idea of a separate plane of existence. These stories are for you. And so for today's episode, if you can kind of get yourself into one of those mindsets, it might just give you the shivers. So let's go have some fun. But before we get to our first story, we need to refer back to a classic film to help us frame the stories. The Sixth Sense.
I hate movies like that. Oh my gosh.
I never want to spoil movies for people, but this one's a classic.
It's been out for so long. If you've not seen it yet, too bad.
Right. But I will say, I'm not actually going to spoil anything. I actually looked up the theatrical trailer. And so everything that I say from here on out is only from the trailer.
Oh.
So it's not actually going to spoil anything about the ending or the plot or anything. Well, there's one little section that we're going to talk about, but it's all in the trailer. There's a kid in the movie. I think he's probably only maybe like 10 years old. And he has this famous line, "I see dead people."
Mm-hmm.
And in so many of the national park stories, this is the takeaway. This is the bedrock claim. But in the movie The Sixth Sense, Bruce Willis, he tells this poor kid, his name is Cole, I think that they know, he's talking about the spirits, I think that they know that you're one of those very rare people who can see them, and so you need to help them. And so frightened Cole responds, what if they don't want help? To which Bruce Willis confidently tells him, I don't think that's the way it works. And then Cole says what everybody else is thinking. How can you be sure? You know, if you see something that you can't explain, if you see dead people, are you really going to hang around, Ash?
Absolutely not.
What if Bruce Willis is right and they do need your help? Or what if the kid is right in being suspicious about the spirit's motivations? Are they actually friendly? It's something to think about as we head into our first park. Indiana Dunes National Park. Charlie remembers the first time he saw her. He was 7. Sarah was 9, and me, Timothy, I was 12. Dad had just got the boat up and running for the first time, and we were taking it out for its maiden voyage. Mom bought Dad a whole new set of lures and fishing gear to celebrate the occasion. With them, Dad said, we finally had a chance to catch the Lake Michigan monster. I was pretty sure that wasn't true, back then at least. I actually think it's more possible now than I did then. Who knew? Anyways, Charlie saw her first. Dad works on freighters, so he'd heard rumors about her. So he acted like he wasn't surprised, but even at 12, I could tell he was just playing it cool. It was a little awkward because she was naked, but we were far enough away and she was mostly in the water, so we didn't really see anything. Still, after the shock of it, Mom told us to look away, and then she told Dad to reel in and get the boat moving. As a practiced married man, he knew when hesitation would come up later. So immediately, Mom's request had his full attention and eye contact. Still, we all knew what we saw. Some people call her a mermaid, but we knew that couldn't be true. Water touches mermaids. Water didn't touch her. So we just called her what Dad said he heard people call her, Diana. It was a couple of years before we went back to that fishing area. It was actually a couple more after that before we visited the dunes again. By that time, Charlie was 12 and I was 17. Sarah was 14 and had gotten her first two-piece swimsuit and wanted to lay out on the beach. Our previous experience, obviously in the rearview mirror, we packed up and made a weekend of it. The way Dad saw it, Sarah got her tanning time and he got his camping time. Dad loves campfires more than anything. The smell of the smoke, s'mores, hot dogs, but most importantly, camp songs. As a teenager, I gotta say, I thought it was super uncool and a little embarrassing, but years later, I still know all the words to My Aunt Came Back, Dead Skunk in the Middle of the Road, and the Rattlin' Bog. Mom really likes West Beach, so we got up early Saturday morning and drove over. It was still a little bit too chilly to get in the water, but Dad had plans. We'd get there, claim our spot on the beach, and then whoever wanted would go hiking. Mom and Sarah stayed on the beach, but Dad required us boys to come, so all three of us headed up to the dunes. The hike wasn't that long, just a few loops that we kind of figure-eighted together, and it was great. Near the end, I was in front. When we came off the trail, we noticed that Mom and Sarah had moved our stuff down the beach. I guess it was a little less crowded down there. As we walked towards them, I noticed that they weren't alone. I mentioned it to Dad. "Who's that with them?" He pulled off his sunglasses, squinted, and said the same thing I was thinking. "I don't know." So we just kept walking, not thinking anything of it. As we got closer, though, things looked just a little bit off. The stranger seemed a little bit too shiny. But Charlie was the one that said it. We hadn't mentioned her, or frankly thought about her in years. Nevertheless, he said it. "Maybe it's Diana." With our memories jogged, Dad and I swiftly quickened our pace. Whoever it was wasn't naked this time, so it wasn't like that. It was just genuine curiosity. I started to call out to Mom and Sarah, but Dad stopped me. "Shh," he said. "Let's just see what happens." And so, as quickly and quietly as we could, the three of us made our way down the beach to Mom and Sarah and the stranger. Charlie was the first one to abandon the speed walk. His legs just weren't long enough to keep up, so he started running. Dad and I, however, were in lockstep, hips swinging wildly to get the longest and most efficient strides possible. But soon, even Dad opted for a quick jog. As we got closer, speed seemed less important, and curiosity was soon replaced with concerned wonder. We saw what we saw. And what do you say in that type of situation? "Hi, Mom, we're back. Tell us about your friend." Or do you say, "Mom, run"? Or do you address the shiny, somewhat transparent person whose bottom is sitting on the sand without making an indent? Dad opted for a general greeting to just cover all the bases. "Hey there!" Mom and Sarah were obviously oblivious to the visitor because as soon as they heard Dad's voice, they both looked over immediately and then jumped up in fright. Diana, however, simply looked over at us, smiled, and disappeared. Needless to say, the rest of the weekend's conversation mainly consisted of one topic. After the initial shock, we huddled together to get our stories straight. We made sure we all saw the same thing. There was a short period of denial from a couple of people, just because it seemed so crazy, but eventually we all came to a consensus. We had seen what, by all descriptions and definitions, must be called a ghost. Maybe a spirit or a phantom, specter or a wraith, I don't know. Maybe a soul. But how do you know if a soul is dead or disembodied? We couldn't be sure. We didn't have any information, and we didn't want to seem crazy. So we decided to stay an extra night. Mom's idea was to go to the visitor center Monday morning. Hopefully the place would be deserted and we could ask the rangers whatever we wanted without raising too many eyebrows. So Dad got an extra night. We hung around one more day. The family was never so antsy, and nobody slept good that night. Monday morning we were up early. Dad probably was up by 5, putting everything away and packing up the car. The only problem was that the visitor center didn't open until 9, and Dad packed the camp chairs away at 7. So we just ended up sitting in the car for a couple of hours. It gave us time to make a list of non-making you sound like a crazy person type of question. But really, we just ordered our questions from least crazy to most crazy. We watched the ranger unlock the door at 9 a.m., But Dad made us wait for 7 minutes so that we didn't seem too eager. Let me tell you, I'd never experienced eternity before those 7 minutes. But I can tell you, it's not all it's cracked up to be. At 9:07, Dad finally opened his door, and in a few short seconds, the family smashed out of the vehicle and leaped to the visitor center door. Once inside the front door, it was about 30 feet to the ranger desk. A tall man wearing a tan, round-brimmed hat smiled at us. As nonchalantly as we could, we heel-toed it across the distance. And Charlie, sweet Charlie, it's not even like he broke protocol. He knew the first question on our list. It just sounds so crazy as a warm-up question, but we were all so amped up that even our warm-up questions were too much. And so with all the earnestness of an innocent 12-year-old boy, Charlie asked the ranger before anybody else had a chance to speak, "Has anybody died here?" And the ranger was obviously about to offer us a hearty greeting like hello or good morning, but it seemed to have got caught in his throat. And all that came out was kind of a weird because his lips forgot to open. And so there we stood, a family of 5 and a park ranger, separated only by a desk and a thick layer of confusion and embarrassment. And I thought that I knew what eternity was, having just lived through the 7 minutes from 9 a.m. to 9:07, but that was nothing compared to this moment. But the question was asked, and despite all of our urges to interrupt the awkwardness, we were willing to let it endure as long as necessary to get the answer to that one question. And so we all stood there looking like 4-year-olds who were being coached by their parents on how to smile normally for the camera. All our eyes trained on one man, our ears ready to interpret any sounds coming from his tight lips. Yet he paused, looked us over, and a single word escaped his lips. Why? And Sarah, who had had enough at this point, couldn't hold it any longer. She couldn't bear the mask of being cool and casual anymore, and all the anxiety and the curiosity came bursting out of her. "Because we saw a ghost, and we want to know if you know who it is." And with that, she covered her mouth, more than just a little embarrassed about her outburst. And so suddenly, the rest of us just accepted that the jig was up. Nobody corrected her or tried to soften the blow. We just accepted the reality of the situation and continued to stand there, still trying to figure out how to smile normally and not quite getting there. But the park ranger, being kind and merciful, recognized the sudden honesty of the situation and waded right in. "You've probably seen Alice." To which Charlie exclaimed, "You have 2 ghosts?" And the park ranger replied, "No, just the one. Some people call her Diana, but her real name is Alice Mabel Gray. She is actually one of the main reasons we have this park." "For ghosts?" Mom asked. No. Alice, or Diana, as some people call her, loved this place. While she was alive, she saw how special it was, and she wanted it to be protected, so much of her life was dedicated to its protection and preservation. Eventually, it was given the protection and attention it deserves, but she wasn't around to see it happen. She died before it became an NPS site. But we don't think she really ever left. Her heart was too connected to this place, or at least her soul was. People have been seeing her for years, but we don't really refer to her as a ghost. We think of her more as a benevolent spirit who just seems happy to be here. She always seems to find the people enjoying the park the most, and she joins them enjoying it. So thanks for being here and enjoying this place. I don't think he meant his last statement to be a closing statement, but it ended up that way. We thanked him for answering our questions, and we walked back out to the car. We got in, and Dad started it up. Before he grabbed the shifter, he looked over at Mom. Then he turned ever so slowly and smiled at us, which was the cue for all of us to scream whatever we were thinking. "Holy cow! I can't believe it! It was real! We're not the only ones! Oh my gosh!" The drive home was a concert of relief and confusion, curiosity and surprise, and every emotion you can imagine. For somewhat obvious reasons, we don't talk about her outside the family. But Indiana Dunes has become a favorite vacation spot. We have all of our family reunions there, and Alice is still there. Or Diana, if you want. She goes by either one. We saw her last month. She doesn't say much, but she's always happy to give you a smile and sit with you on the sand. The end.
Ooh. So people really see her?
Yeah. She used a skinny dip in the ocean, which was a huge scandal back then. But yeah, people see her on the trails and they see her on the dunes.
Nice.
But not really a scary spirit.
Yeah, that's good. She seems nice.
Yeah. And so if Bruce Willis told you to help that spirit, you probably would be okay with it.
I don't know. I don't know.
Anyway, Alice the Friendly Ghost, right?
Yeah.
So, or Diana the Friendly Ghost,
Why did they call her both names?
So she became famous for skinny dipping. And it was a huge scandal.
When she was alive.
Yeah, when she was alive. And they had some nicknames for her, but one of them was Diana of the Dunes. And Diana referring to like a love goddess or something like that.
Right.
And so that's why they called her that.
Not Dirty Diana.
Not Michael Jackson's Dirty Diana. Exactly. But yeah, so that made her famous, and she used that fame to try to get the place protected.
Interesting.
So it's a very interesting story, but that's why you see her skinny dipping at the beginning of the story.
Nice.
But
so Diana or Alice?
Diana or Alice.
Go to Indiana Dunes. Be on the lookout.
Especially around West Beach.
Honestly, that's enough to get me to never go there.
Yeah.
I don't do ghosts.
Yes. She's so cool, though. I want to go there just for that. They have, at the park, they have a Diana's Dare, I guess. So they have a loop that she shows up at most, but also you get to know her story a little bit along some of the panels along the way.
I just feel like if we were camping, you would not sleep because you'd be waiting for her, and I would not sleep because I'd be scared.
Yeah, it would be. I don't think we would stay the weekend.
No.
If we had seen that, we would be off the beach, chairs thrown in the back of the truck, so nothing put away, and we'd be out of there.
I wouldn't be able to hold in my crazy. Let's just say that.
So we've had a friendly ghost.
No. Okay. Is it getting worse?
I wonder if the next ghosts will be so friendly. Let's go to Olympic National Park in Washington State. The Lady of the Lake. Tom is an interesting character. He is honest most of the time. He obeys the rules most of the time. In fact, if you didn't know any better, you'd probably think he was a stickler for the rules. Take driving, for example. He never gets in the carpool lane when he's by himself. And he always comes to a complete stop at stop signs. He even obeys the arrows in Walmart parking lots. What most people don't know, though, is that he takes great delight in planned disobedience. It's his way of rewarding himself. So when his wife told him that she wanted to visit Olympic National Park in Washington, he started thinking of ways to reward himself for just how good he's been all year. So he sat down for one of his favorite pastimes, reading through the rules and regulations at Olympic National Park so that he could pick the rule he wanted to intentionally and gloriously disobey. He found something interesting that he read to himself over and over again. This was it. He just knew it. And after a few hours on the internet and a few $100s spent, he was ready to go. He was going to break the rules in Olympic National Park, and he was going to relish the experience. So he and his wife planned this beautiful trip for them and their 3 teenage kids. They were going to stay at the Lake Crescent Lodge. The lake would be beautiful, and they would use it as their home base to explore the rest of the park. When they packed the family vehicle for the road trip, it was easy for him to hide his little side project. They took a couple of days to drive there, and nobody suspected a thing. Everybody was so excited. Everything was breathtakingly beautiful. They made it to Lake Crescent in the early evening. Then his chance came. Everybody was itching to go kayaking, so he took the opportunity to be the good dad. He said he would unload the vehicle and have dinner ready for them when they got back. They all gladly accepted his offer. So he quickly threw everything in the room, got all the dinner stuff as ready as needed, and he headed off. He probably had about half an hour, maybe an hour till they got back. So he grabbed the hidden box, opened it up, and pulled out his brand new Wi-Fi enabled 4K camera capable remote control operated drone.
Oh.
And went about looking for his spot. You're not supposed to fly these things in national parks for lots of reasons. But he didn't care. He obeys all the rules so that every once in a while he can enjoy breaking one rule. He knew where he wanted to go. He was going to head off along the shore and find a clump of trees where he could be alone and launch his drone. So off he went. The conditions were perfect. The daily summer swimmers had all gone home for the day. The shoreline was basically deserted. He could see his family quite a ways out on the water. He found his desired clump of trees, set his drone down in a place where he could safely launch it, sat down on a stump, and boom, he was off. There was just something about breaking the rules that had always excited him. He knows that he gets it from his dad because his dad used to purposefully not rewind the movies he returned to Blockbuster. He believes he helped bring them down. Anyways, the elation he felt was crisp and beautiful, way better than taste testing a few grapes at the grocery store a couple months ago. This was spectacular. He could control the drone with his phone, and the camera image was incredible. 4K really was impressive, and the landscape was just stunning. The sun had already gone down behind the mountains, but the lighting on the trees and the lake and the lodge, wow, breathtaking. After 3 or 4 minutes, somebody started coming along the trail. He was a little embarrassed, but he was being pretty quiet, and maybe they wouldn't care about the drone noise. He looked up as the person passed, and for a moment he forgot all about the drone. He saw a beautiful woman wearing a dress, but her dress and hairstyle looked like they were from a different time. She passed pretty quickly, but from his quick glimpse of her, it also looked like her skin had an odd glow. And then she was gone. He was so surprised by what he saw that the drone just hovered where it was in the sky for about 15 seconds. When he came back to himself, curiosity got the better of him. He turned the drone and sent it after the woman. He wanted a better look, something in 4K because maybe his eyes were just acting weird. He piloted the drone along the shoreline but didn't see anything, so he decided to march down the trail by himself. The drone had enough battery life to hover there for a while. As he neared the spot where the shoreline comes to a point, he saw her a ways off. It was getting a bit darker, and she was exactly how he thought she was. Old-time dress, old-time hairstyle. But maybe she was just wearing a lot of makeup. After 20 seconds or so, the novelty wore off, and he didn't want to seem like a creeper. Plus, she was sort of coming toward him, so he headed back to his spot in the trees. When he got back, he sat on his stump. He pulled his phone back up, and what he saw shook him. In the water, 50 to 100 feet below where the drone was hovering, was the woman. She was floating face down in the water, not moving. He burst out of the trees, ran down the trail to the shore, and looked for his drone. He spotted it not too far off and set off at a sprint. He didn't have time to think, but how did she have time to drown? It was only like 2 minutes since he saw her walking. He got to the nearest point on land to where she was. He looked at the drone. This time, she was face up in the water, still not moving, but her skin looked different. She must be turning blue because of the lack of oxygen. He quickly put his phone, keys, and wallet on the shore and ran out into the water. The drone was perfect. It was his X marks the spot. If he could get below the drone, he could get to her. He didn't need to try and spot her in the water. He just needed to find his drone. After 10 to 15 steps, it was deep enough for him that he needed to swim. He jumped forward, pulling his body through the water, kicking his legs and feet, shoes still on as he splashed through the water. Nearer and nearer he got, looking up every few strokes just to verify that he was still on target. Finally, it seemed, and out of breath, he reached her. Or where she should have been. He looked up. The drone was right above him. Treading water, he looked all around him. There was no sign of her. He put his head underwater. Maybe she'd started sinking. Nothing. He swam in big circles, eyes open wide under the water. Nothing. He dove as deep as he could. Nothing. How could this be happening? She was right here. With every dive, his disbelief became stronger. What was happening? She was right here. His panic grew. He needed help. He wasn't finding her. He knew he saw her here. She was dying somewhere around here, but he just wasn't getting the job done. He lost confidence that he could do it alone. He swam back to shore, grabbed his phone, and ran for the lodge. He tried calling 911, but he didn't have any service. He knew his body was tired, but the adrenaline was obviously helping him go. Faster and faster, he burst into the lobby of the lodge, out of breath and dripping wet, but he managed to get 2 words out. Drowning girl. The person at the front desk grabbed their phone and dialed for emergency help. Within minutes, park ranger emergency staff were pulling into the parking lot. Having caught his breath, he explained the situation and they all ran to where it was happening. He knew he had arrived when he saw his drone splash into the water as it ran out of battery. He and another ranger jumped in after it. Not for the drone really, but for where the drone was. The drone, for better or for worse, was still the marking spot where he saw her last. Both Tom and the ranger were good swimmers. They reached the drone that was still floating partly above the water. Heads underwater, eyes open, they both swam around looking for any sign of the woman. Nothing. When exhaustion finally caught up to him, Tom grabbed the drone and headed in. He dragged himself up on the shore and sat down next to his wallet, phone, and keys. "I just don't understand it," he said to the park ranger standing there on the shore who was scanning the water with binoculars. "Let me show you on my phone." He pulled up the video and they watched it from beginning to end. From takeoff to splashdown, the only person in the video ever was Tom. The drone caught Tom swimming around, but the video never showed the woman face up or face down. Tom went silent. He couldn't believe what was happening. The ranger whistled to his buddy, who, to his credit, was still splashing around. He waved him in. The wet ranger trudged out of the water. Tom still hadn't spoken. "Looks like we got another one. But at least this one was using a drone so we can give him a ticket." The wet ranger groaned, as if it was hardly a satisfactory punishment. They all walked back to the lodge. Tom couldn't understand what was happening. He was totally dumbfounded. They didn't chat much. The rangers gave him a citation and they left. Still wet, Tom watched the video over and over again while he drip-dried on the couch. The lady behind the front desk, who chewed her gum very loudly, by the way, had watched everything as it played out. She called him over. "Psst! Hey you! Come here! Don't feel bad. She's had a busy year." Tom only heard the last part. "She's had a busy year?" What? It thumped him out of his stupor like a wooden mallet. "What do you mean she's had a busy year?" "Hallie, the lady of the lake. You're the 3rd guy this year. Good for you, though. You're the only one who got wet. You're also the only one who got fined, though. So the good with the bad, though, I guess." "What?" "Okay, listen, I've done this a lot, so I'm just going to cruise through this, and then you should get back to your room and forget this ever happened." "Well, you should pay your fine first, then forget this ever happened. But what you saw isn't real." "But you said her name was Hallie." "Right. She was real. Her name was Hallie. Hallie Illingworth. She worked here like 100 years ago. It wasn't the lodge then, though. It was a tavern. Anyways, she worked here. She actually met her 3rd husband here, and he was a beer truck driver, and they got married in 1936. It was a bad marriage from the start, though. She would come to work all bruised and beat up. Anyways, in 1937, she went missing. Her husband said she ran off with a sailor from Alaska. 3 years later, in 1940, they found her. Her body was all wrapped up in a blanket, tied with ropes and floating in Lake Crescent. What's crazy is that her body didn't hardly decay at all. The cold water and some of the minerals in the water at its deepest point had preserved her body incredibly well. Her skin had kind of a dull, soapy, waxy texture to it. But it was her all right. She had been strangled to death. And someone sunk her to the bottom of the lake. They tracked down her husband and nailed him on it, but he was only in jail for 9 years. People see her from time to time, here in the lodge, out on the trail, but she always ends up in the water. It always ends the same. A few grumpy rangers and a guy with that same confused, startled look on his face. Don't worry about it. Go back to your room, get dried off, get some sleep. Try not to think about it. With that, she seemed to dismiss Tom. So he turned around, confused and startled, and started walking toward the door. A few steps before the door, he paused, looked behind him, and simply asked, "So it wasn't real?" She looked in his direction, considered him for a moment, then with as much honesty as she could muster, replied, "Right. It wasn't real." And with that, Tom shuffled back to his room. He hoped to beat his family back so that he wouldn't have to explain why his clothes were all wet and dinner wasn't ready. Along the way, he dropped the drone in the garbage, and he's never said a word about it ever since. The end.
So, I've never seen The Lady of the Lake. Have you seen The Lady of the Lake?
I have never seen the Lady of Lake, but lots of people have. They see her in two specific places. They see her by the Lake Crescent Lodge, or they see her on the Spruce Railroad Trail.
Oh, on the other side of the lake.
On the other side of the lake. And so the story is true. She went missing like 6 months or so after their marriage. He disappeared. He went to California, and they found her like 4 years later. But her body was incredibly well preserved, and her skin, they called it like soapy, is the way that it looked. And so, anyhow.
Gross. So he like weighed her down so she was buried in the water, but then it didn't last.
Right.
So she just all of a sudden popped up.
She floated to the top.
Oh my gosh.
And she's never left.
Oh my gosh.
What would you think of Bruce Willis if he wanted you to talk to her?
I don't talk to ghosts. Lake Crescent is one of my favorite places at Olympic.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking as you were talking about him like trying to look for her in the water, I was like, that water is so clear. You can see down so far. Like
right.
He would have seen her if she was there.
Yeah.
It's some of the clearest, most beautiful water
right.
in any national park, I think. So,
yeah. So he should have been able to find her.
Yeah.
Goodness.
I
think the most upsetting part of that story was the guy flying the drone for you.
I was like, no drones.
Oh, I loved that. I just saw Ash from across the way just what a so funny. So anyways, not all ghosts are benevolent spirits, but we don't know why they haven't moved on. So let's go to our next and final story, which is currently, the setting is the largest national park in America.
I am so excited for this one because I have heard stories around this national park.
Yeah.
And I have to say, when there are like ghost town type places in a national park, it ups the creepy factor so much for me. I love them, but yes. I definitely don't want to see anything while I'm there.
Exactly. Let's see how you feel about Bruce Willis after this one. So we're heading to Wrangell-St. Elias National Park in Alaska. This one is huge. I've always enjoyed my job. Working for Mr. Wallerman has been a great opportunity. I've learned so much from him. I've never actually met him, but his business philosophy and enterprise has been such an experience. I like to think of myself as the tip of the spear. I've been able to travel all around the world. California, Florida, Texas. I was so excited for this current trip, Alaska. I'm the first step in a large machine. When businesses start to decline, they contact Mr. Wallerman, and he decides whether or not to swoop in and fix things, or if the price is right to just buy everything and sell it off piece by piece. It all depends on what's more profitable. But I'm the fact checker. When Mr. Wallerman gets a tip, he sends me. I inventory everything I see, describe the condition of things, and give my initial assessment. It all goes in my report that goes straight to Mr. Wallerman's assistant vice president's office. But I'm sure Mr. Wallerman reads it, so I make sure everything is perfect, which is why I was so frustrated when I got to Alaska. Usually I have several people showing me around describing things, explaining processes and the value of things as they see it. But when my boat got to Anchorage, I was informed that nobody was going to be escorting me around the property. Instead, I was handed an inventory report that I could use as I inspected the property. This was very frustrating because mining operations can be very difficult to value. Besides all of the buildings and equipment, I usually like to know how much value they still think is left in the mineral rights in the land. Anyways, it was bad from the start, and it only got worse. The Kennecott mining operation is so isolated up there that the company had to build their own private railroad to get people and supplies and all of the precious metals in and out of the mining town. And since I was going alone, the conductor refused to take me. Anyways, I spent 2 days arguing with him and corresponding via telegraph with my company and his to get him to take me out there. I planned to stay 2 nights at Kennecott to do my inventory, but he said it was his duty as a Christian man to keep me from staying in there all alone. I asked him if it was because of the bears and wolves, but his response was somewhat unconvincing, so I pressed him on it. He said that there were reports of strange and dangerous things happening there. He said he's seen things that he can't explain. When pressed even harder, he admitted that people had reported seeing ghosts of dead miners and ghosts of the people that had built the railroad and such. I never had such a good laugh. To which he responded just how I wanted him to. Raymond is his name. He's a bit older, reminds you a little bit of a salty Santa Claus. He got all red in his face, and then he says to me, "I'll take you. I'll even leave you the caboose so that you have something to stay in. Let's just see how you handle 2 days all alone. I'll come back for you, I promise, but you'll wish I tried harder to stop you." He left about 12 hours ago. We arrived in Kennecott, and the ride was beautiful, by the way, but he disconnected the caboose for me, and he was off. He didn't speak much. Neither did I. I'm probably the only person within 200 miles. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I will admit, if you think about it, this place is a little creepy. The buildings creak, the wind causes all kinds of metal things to cling together. I even had to chase away a coyote earlier. Raymond left me a pistol to scare away the animals. He told me to keep it with me, and he gave me a holster. It was fully loaded with 6 bullets when he gave it to me, and I've used 3. I used 2 to target shoot a can that I saw, and 1 to scare away the coyote. Nothing too weird has happened. I've misplaced a few pencils as I've wandered in and out of buildings, and I've lost a couple of items, but I found almost all of them. They weren't too far away from me. The only reason I'm awake now is because I really need to pee. I'm debating whether or not I should go outside or just open a window and let it fly. But I know I'm a gentleman, so I'll go outside. Like I said, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. The moon has come up. I grab my lantern, light it, and open the door to the train car. There is almost no wind right now. I walk a respectable distance from the train, set the lantern down, and start to do my business. It's quiet. So quiet. And crap, my lantern is fading. Is it out of oil? I don't know. I'll check it in a minute. If it goes out, I'll be fine. The moon is pretty bright. Thanks, Raymond, for giving me a lantern with no oil in it. I finish up and pick up the lantern just as the flame goes out. I shake my head. I start to walk back to the train car when I stop. There is no way I just saw what I thought I saw. The moon is shining pretty bright, but it's also shining right through the train car windows. And I think I just saw a shadow pass by the glass. I grab for my hip, but the gun is still in the train car. I didn't think to bring it with me. I don't know what to do, so I sneak as quietly as I can to the other side of the train. I want a glimpse in through the window. As I get nearer the train, I start to feel a chill in the air. I get to the other side and peek in through the window, but I can't see anything. Or at least nothing's moving. It was probably nothing. It was probably one of those floaters in your eyes, and it just caught my attention at the worst possible time. I walk up the stairs, grab a hold of the door and handle, but it's locked. Suddenly my mind flashes and the pit falls in my stomach. Did I really lock myself out of this train car? Did somebody lock me out? I put my lantern down and search for a key in my pockets, and then it comes to me. I used the other door. I snuck around to the opposite side of the train. Okay, so that one is still open. I reach back down for my lantern, but it's not there. Did it fall down? I don't know. I go down the steps and look under the train, look around, but I can't see anything. The moon is giving off plenty of light. I'll be fine. I'll find it in the morning. I walk around the train, and again, something catches my eye. Sitting on a workbench about 30 feet from the train, I see something silver. I stop and squint. It's the pistol. I freeze. Did I leave the gun out here after I scared the coyote away? No way. I'm sure I brought it inside. That's where the holster is, I think. A mist starts to appear in the air, and the glimmer on the gun starts to fade. As calmly as I can, I walk to the workbench and pick up the gun, only to turn around and see that a light is flickering from where I just came. The lantern is trying to start itself back up. I walk up to the steps that I just left, bend over and grab the lantern. As I stand up, I look at the window, but I can't see through because it's all fogged up. The lantern shines bright on the window and my eyes focus on my reflection. I look kind of silly in my pajamas out here all alone holding a gun. As I look at myself, parts of my reflection start to change. Darker lines start to appear on my face in my reflection. It's not my reflection. My eyes focus on the glass, on the fog. It's the fog on the glass. The lines are cutting through the fog and forming letters. It's as if 20 fingers are all touching the glass at the same time, all wiping letters out of the foggy window. I step back and gasp as I realize what's happening. I stumble and fall backwards. The lantern breaks and the light goes out. The ground starts to shake. My mind is a blur. My ears start to ring. The light shines on the window and I can clearly see and read the words, "We're still here." I run down the steps and look along the tracks. It's Raymond pulling in with his train engine. I run over and jump on the train as it comes to a stop. I run up the steps. He can see the fright on my face. He puts the train back in gear and we speed away without hooking up the caboose. I can hardly speak and Raymond isn't asking questions. He's red in the face just like I am. I'm just glad to be putting distance between me and that place. The only thing is that the pit in my stomach won't go away, and it's because every time I look out the window, I see headstones, tombstones lining the train tracks. Edward Donaldson, Oscar Hanson, Louis Anderson, name after name, headstone after headstone, Charles Cowell, Daniel Koch, Frank Bingham, names flashing in stone as we pass. So I just keep looking out the back where everything disappears into the darkness. And I can't tell for sure, but I think Raymond sees them too. I can see it on his face. And we both know that they weren't there on the way in. Dun, dun, dun.
No thanks.
Not all ghosts have good intentions.
The Kennecott area of Wrangell, though. Holy smokes.
Yeah. That place has some serious ghost stories.
Yeah.
People see tombstones lining the train tracks as they go in and out of that place, and then they never see them again. And miners, people that worked there, would report, and they actually stopped a job at one point. Like, they stopped a job because tools were going missing out of people's tool belts.
Oh my gosh. So how many people died there? Do we know?
I don't think we know, because I think that, like a lot of Wild West stuff that happened, the mine went out of operation like in the late mid 30s, the 1930s. Mm-hmm. And they kind of sold it off piece by piece. And so this is kind of probably an accurate depiction of people going in, evaluating it, and coming out. But when people would go in on the trains, they'd see things. And they stopped the job at one point because so much freaky stuff had happened. And imagine, though, you're like the only human for hundreds of miles.
Yeah, I mean, that park is so remote.
Yeah.
And to even get in there takes quite a bit of effort. Oh my gosh. What I keep thinking is like how hardened those miners were to work in Alaska, of all places, plus like a very remote area of Alaska.
Yeah.
During a time when there was no, like it was a free-for-all Wild West type of environment still probably. And then to have them stop jobs because they're all freaking out.
Yeah.
That it would have taken, I think, a lot to freak those men out.
It's the city of Kennecott right there is the ghost town. They have a cemetery, but the reason they think that tombstones show up along the train tracks is because they would just bury people along the way, and forget about them. And so who knows how many spirits are left wandering the paths of Wrangell-St. Elias because they didn't get a proper burial.
I will never go there when it's dark outside.
We are not camping in Wrangell. We will drive in and drive out. Oh my gosh. So anyhow, I personally believe in spirits. So when I'm telling these stories, like I'm thinking, I think stuff could happen.
For sure. Well done. Well done. I was on the edge of my seat.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing another round of ghost stories from the national parks with us. Happy Halloween, everybody. We will see you next year for our Haunted National Parks tradition. Have a really fun evening, and hopefully the ghosts don't come out while you're trick-or-treating.